Everybody's got ideas in their head, and some people are content to let them sit there and stew, but other people got to get them out. People like artists, writers, directors, producers, these are people that can't just let ideas sit in their head. They've got to make sure that they get them out to the public, make sure everybody knows about them. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about comic book artists. People like Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster, Bill Watterson, Stan Lee, people who have made their characters into household names. Characters like Superman, Calvin and Hobbes, Spider-Man. All these characters have become something that it's instantly recognizable because someone decided to sit down and make a comic book. Sometimes these spawn movies like the Avengers that made over $200 million just in the opening weekend. All because Stan Lee and Jack Kirby decided to sit down and make a comic book. So, today, what we're going to do is learn the steps that everybody uses, that you can use to make a comic. First off, you want to gather up all your materials. You're going to need paper, obviously. You're going to need a pencil, inking pen, a sharpener if the pencil isn't mechanical. You're going to need an eraser and a ruler. And lastly, you're going to need some colored pencils, or, if you want, a scanner and some editing software like Photoshop or GIMP to color in your materials. So you got to start, after you get all that, by brainstorming. Try to make up some unique ideas. You want to gather up as many ideas as you can. Sometimes it's hard to think of your own, but if you can think of movies, video games, books, and magazines even, things that you've found interesting, and find ways to turn them into your own ideas. Write down everything. Keep a nest of your ideas. Don't let anything go away. You might forget it, and even if you don't think it's a great idea to start out with, it can be made into a good idea if you give it time. And if you can't think of a way to make it good, get rid of it, but make sure you have it written down in the first place, because you never know. After you do all of that, you're going to do some simple storyboards or block out ideas on notebook cards. It can look a bit messy, as you can see here at first, but it's very useful because it can give you an idea of how you want your story to flow and how everything's going to go from start to finish. Speaking of start to finish, it's a good idea to have a good beginning and a good end already in mind when you start all of this whole process. If you know where your characters are in the beginning and if you know where they are in the end, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to fill in the gaps in between. If you know that in the end, Jughead's going to eat 20 hamburgers, you know, you're not really going to be lost by panel 20, right? So practice makes perfect, just like in every other situation. You want to get your main character and any important side characters, and you want to draw them over and over and over again, different angles, different poses. Do the same with backgrounds. Use reference materials if you have to. You want to get really good with it. And the same is also true with lettering. Comic books generally use all capital letters, especially sound effects here, you know, big booms and pows. Make them your own. Again, make them unique, but take the tips from the pros, you know. People have been doing this for a long time, and they've got some good ideas, so keep an eye out. Comic book scripts are something that are very important and people don't often think about. There's no set template everybody uses, but you do need to have the page number, panel number, scene description, dialogue and exposition, and sound effects. This will help you keep things organized without having to cram unnecessary things into a page. So after you get your script down, you're going to do another storyboard. This one will be a little bit more detailed. You can have a few comic pages worth of storyboard per page. Like you see here, this is a little simplistic, but it kind of gets the idea across. As with everything else here, it kind of helps the ideas flow. It helps everything stay organized. You want to make sure that your panels are readable. Make sure it's easy to know which panel you're going to go to. You don't want to jump around a whole lot. You also don't want to forget, make sure that you block out room in your panels for your dialogue bubbles and your exposition boxes. Sound effects can kind of be squeezed in there if they have to, but those are important. Alright, you need to gather up everything now. Gather up your supplies, your sketches, your reference materials, your script, and your storyboards, because it's time to get started in making a real comic. It can be a little bit intimidating at first, but if you just keep the steps down, you'll get it. The first part is really tedious. Unless you use a computer to do it, you need to block all of your panels on every single page, so depending on how long it is, this can take a while. You want to have uniform, either an eighth or a quarter or a half of an inch border, and make sure you have white space in between your panels. Otherwise, things are going to get really confusing. Once you have all that down, draw. Draw your comic. Draw your bubbles and your exposition boxes. Draw it all. Make sure you do it lightly though, because you're going to be erasing all this after you ink it. Practice makes perfect, so if you can't get something right, take another sheet of paper, a scratch piece of paper, draw it over and over again until you have it down, okay? After you do all that, ink. Go over everything. Ink it all up. Be really careful. Take your time. This is permanent, right? Once you get done, you want to erase it all. Erase all the pencil marking that was underneath. Be really light. You don't want to tear the paper. Make sure you ink in all the lines that you may have missed, any connections too. After that, you want to do your cover. Now your cover and your splash are both very important. Your splash is going to be the first page, whereas your cover is going to be the first thing everybody sees. They both need to be eye-catching, interesting, tell something about the story without giving too much away, obviously, but yeah, you want to make sure that it's interesting. It grabs the reader's attention as they're walking by. And what is interesting? Color is interesting. So here, either take your colored pencils or markers or Copic pens, whatever you have, or again, if you have a scanner, you can scan everything into your computer, use something like Photoshop or GIMP, make everything really pop. There's a lot of good software out there, and a lot of it's free. Once you do all those steps, you've got your own comic. Congratulations. Not going to be exactly like this necessarily. Not a lot of people are doing Archie and Ethel out there, but keep up with it, and you're going to produce a really good product as long as you practice and are careful.